Tequila to the glory days at the stick. From who's got it better than us to brick by brick. It's always the 49ers way, from off-season to game day. Yeah, we talk back. It's the 49ers Cutback.
It's 49ers Cutback podcast time. Welcome to the show, everyone. And this is a topic that everyone has been wanting to discuss the entire time. It's a question that comes up every single offseason since Kyle Shanahan got to San Francisco in 2017. And with Chris Verster taking over a few years ago, I think it's like 4 years ago now, when John Benton went to be with Robert Saleh with the New York Jets, there's been question marks about how the 49ers build their offensive line. And one of the questions they go into every single season is the 49ers offensive line good enough? And there's certain ways to evaluate this, right? And we've heard Chris Verster talk about, finding that level that you stay above, that's good enough, right? Investing in playmakers so that way you can kind of skimp at offensive line. And people have argued, why skimp, right? You see in the league, there's differences in opinion on how you handle offensive line. Look at the Detroit Lions, invest in offensive line. You look at Chicago Bears, where Ben Johnson just went, invest in offensive line. He picked up 3 new offensive linemen to stabilize that offensive line as soon as he got to Chicago. With the 49ers, it's not that way. They find mid-round picks. They find undrafted free agents. They find veterans who haven't worked out and are off the scrap heap, and they try to turn those guys into capable players. Then you have Trent Williams, who is the unicorn, who was an absolute steal when the 49ers traded for him. But Trent Williams is the elite case for the 49ers. He is the ultimate offensive tackle. And then when you look at the rest of the team, it's kind of a bunch of pieces here and there, a mix of mid-round draft picks and undrafted free agents that they've kind of put together, try to have a makeshift offensive line. And in some cases, it's worked out, as I use my hands and I hit my mic there, because I'm so into this that I've got my own little pass protection moves going. But the 49ers offensive line is going to be one of the key elements to whether this team produces in 2025 to the level that we're hoping this offense is going to produce to, or they don't. And there are too many players on this team that have question marks. So what we're going to do in this episode is we're going to evaluate this offensive line. We're going to look at their PFF scores of what they've done. We're going to go and talk about some of the things that I've seen as I've broke down each player throughout the offseason. I've been working extensively on continuing to break down each player, even the ones I don't put on Patreon. I have a lot of breakdowns there, but I just do some stuff so that way I have the knowledge to be able to express what I'm talking about. We're going to talk about that, but we're also going to look a little bit at the NFC West, because we're going to be playing the NFC West twice. And I want to see how the 49ers compare offensive line-wise to some of the defensive lines they're going to be going against, because defensive line has been the name of the game for the Arizona Cardinals, Los Angeles Rams, and Seattle Seahawks. They have all invested very heavily in defensive line over the last couple of years. They have put together some pretty built defensive lines that should be tough for the 49ers to deal with. So that's what we're going to be doing in this episode. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you're listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network, of course, that is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to your podcasts. And if you think I deserve it, you listen to the end. You say, hey, it's pretty good. If you give me a 5-star rating, that'd be great. If you don't think I deserve it, well, don't have to give a rating. You don't have to waste your time. But I thought I'd throw it out there. And if you were going to bet with BetOnline. BetOnline continues to be your number one source for all your sports betting action. And with baseball in full swing and football season around the corner, BetOnline has more ways to stay in on the action with the latest odds, news, and scores, even live in-game betting. From Major League Baseball, UFC, to tennis and NFL futures, BetOnline remains your choice for sports wagering info. In between games, head over to the BetOnline Casino with all the top Vegas-style games, including poker and live casino. Head to the website today and take advantage of their industry-leading VIP program with level-up bonuses and weekly cash boosts. BetOnline, the game starts here. So for the 49ers, they are a team that, depending on who you look at, and I have this article from Pro Football Network where the 49ers were ranked number 15 last year at an 80.2, which is a B minus. And I think a lot of people might hear that and say, there's no way the 49ers were a top 15 offensive line last year. And I think that there are question marks. I think they had some real struggles. I thought Aaron Banks, who got a $77 million contract from the Green Bay Packers, struggled a lot last year. And I know a lot of it had to do with health. He wasn't moving as well. He was dealing with some lower leg injuries that hurt him when it came to quickness. And he's already borderline of having enough quickness. So that was a definite problem for the 49ers. They also played without Trent Williams for most of the season. You're never going to be better playing without Trent Williams. But there was a bright spot. Dominic Pooney stepped in, and Dominic Pooney looks like he's going to be the real deal. And of course, if you've been on the channel for a while, you know Dominic Pooney was one of my guys in last year's draft. I was a huge fan of him, and it panned out. But, I mean, full transparency, even I didn't think Dominic Pooney was going to step into the lineup day one and become a NFL starter. I thought it was going to take him a year. They were going to have him on the Aaron Banks type policy where he comes in, he learns, and then the next year he's able to take over when the 49ers had to move on from Aaron Banks. I was thinking he's the eventual replacement for Aaron Banks. But with injury comes opportunity. And Dominic Pooney seized that opportunity and had a really good season last year. But when you look at the overall offensive line, you had guys who, played, kind of well, some guys that didn't play well, and that forced the 49ers to play as the 18th best offensive line over the final 4 weeks. They were really close to the top 10 for most during that ranking. But one of the things that the 49ers usually excel at is when it comes to running the football. And they were still one of the best, ranking 4th in run blocking. When you look at some key metrics, that is something they did well. But some of the metrics also show that there were times where the running backs and wide receivers did a little bit extra to help along the way. So you've got a offensive line that is built uniquely. And I think when you look at it, you got to start with Trent Williams because he is the best offensive lineman in the league when healthy. And that's the key caveat, is when healthy. I think that they believe that he's going to rebound. It was a offseason that allowed him to get healthy. I think last year he really got off to a bad start after missing training camp. I think that was a bad idea for somebody like Trent Williams, who normally rounds out into shape during training camp, even though he doesn't play a lot of reps. It is a thing that helps him. Well, last year he was an 85.6 overall grade. That is 6th best still amongst tackles. So even though Trent Williams wasn't his best last year, he was still near the top 5 of offensive tackles. His pass blocking grade, which is normally well into the 90s, was an 84.5. That's 9th best. His run blocking grade, which is usually up near the 90s, was an 81.4 grade. But he only played 649 snaps last year for the San Francisco 49ers. So when your best offensive lineman doesn't play up to his top level, I mean, he gave up 1 sack, he had 5 penalties, and he gets penalized a little bit more now than he used to, which is, I know, definitely frustrating for him. But that's going to have an impact on you when you are just not as healthy or as in shape as you want to be. Now, when you look at Dominic Pooney, even though it was a very good season last year, when you talk about his PFF grades, it didn't rank out to be as good as maybe people were thinking. He's still got room for improvement. He was an 80.5 overall grade. That is 11th best amongst guards. Fantastic. His pass blocking grade, 68.9, which was 40th best amongst guards. That is a element that I'm actually really surprised about, because Dominic Pooney, his strength is pass blocking. Even when he came into the league, the anchor, right, the ability to move laterally, it was going to be something he was very consistent at. Now, I will say this. The 49ers ranked as 6th worst amongst all NFL teams with quarterbacks holding onto the football. So the 49ers quarterbacks held on the football over 3 seconds, 6th worst amongst NFL players or NFL teams. That does not help a guy like Dominic Pooney be able to withstand his blocks. That is also a problem with the 49ers offensive line being as effective. The quarterbacks have to be as effective. They have to play in rhythm. They have to get rid of the football. All of this works to help this offensive line. That also means wide receivers have to get open. So there's a lot of elements that go into this, but that was a little bit surprising when looking at Dominic Puni, that his pass blocking grade was less effective than his run blocking grade, which was an 81.5, which is an inverse of what I expected it to be for Dominic Puni. But that's good news because he is a good pass blocker. I fully expect his pass blocking to get better. And if Brock Purdy can get rid of the football a little bit earlier, that's going to help immensely. And we could see a guy that grades out into the 80s in both categories and could be a Pro Bowl or all-pro player. So a lot to like about Dominic Puni. And I think through two players, right? Trent Williams, we know, is good enough. I mean, this dude's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's great. More than good enough. Dominic Puni, more than good enough. So we've went through two of the 49ers starting offensive linemen so far, and they're definitely more good enough. Now, it's going to get a little bit more interesting as we go through the next several players. And I'm going to go next to Colton McKivitz. And there has been a groundswell of support for Colton McKivitz and a lot of negativity, depending on what category you're in as a fan. I believe that Colton McKivitz is an improving offensive tackle. And that's kind of crazy to say considering he's been in the league, for a while. He's 28 years old, but with playing time often comes improvement. And I think that's what we're getting from Colton McKivitz. His sophomore season as a starter at right tackle was far superior to what he did in his rookie season as a starter. I know he wasn't a rookie, but his first year as a starter taking over for Mike McGlinchey, I thought that Colton McKivitz did a really good job, considering, but he gave up 10 sacks. Now, when you look at what he did last year, you could see the improvement. This is why I want people to kind of give him a break, and he doesn't need to get him, replaced. I think he's a solid right tackle in the NFL. You figure there's 32 starting left tackles in the NFL. Those guys should be probably ranked in the top 32 tackles. And then when you get to right tackle, you're going to have another 32. So where does he sit amongst the top 64 is always the biggest question. Well, he had a 72.2 overall grade last year at offensive tackle. That is 37th best. So one of the top right tackles in the league, if you go off that number, right? Potentially 4 to 5 offensive tackles, that are better than him. Now, we know that there's some right tackles that are better than some of the left tackles, so it doesn't go exactly that direction. But I'm just saying, he's within that threshold. He is a very serviceable right tackle in the NFL. His pass blocking grade, a 72.8, a vast improvement from the year before. That's 43rd best amongst tackles. His run blocking grade, 68.6. That is 45th amongst offensive tackles. When you look at his numbers, he graded out pretty consistently in the range in which he's paid and to play right tackle. Because when you look at the discrepancy amongst good offensive tackles in the league, you definitely see that there's not that many, right? There's some guys at the top, and then there's a lot of guys hanging around the middle. But he played 1,062 snaps. That's a lot of snaps. Colton McKivitz doesn't miss games. He stays healthy. And overall, he's played pretty consistent over the last couple years. He went from allowing 10 sacks in 2023 to allowing 2 sacks in 2024. Is it perfect? No. But when you look at that, that's a great improvement. Now, can he get it to 1? Can he get it to 0? Those are things that I like from Colton McKivitz, that we're seeing a positive direction for him. I would like to see him not commit as many penalties, but he had 1 less penalty than Trent Williams, even though he played well over, 2 times the snaps. So 6 penalties is still too many. But I think seeing the fact that his sack numbers have dropped, it definitely impresses me more. Now, one thing about the 49ers in 2024 that was a difference was they actually had a lot more pass blocking snaps than run blocking snaps. And that is a difference from 2023, where they relied on the run heavily and the pass was kind of just integrated. They were more of a pass-heavy team, which meant more opportunities for sacks, and he still did better. So I think that Colton McKivitz is going the right direction. So I would say Colton McKivitz is good enough, or a little bit better than good enough. When you're talking about a right tackle in the NFL, I think he definitely grades out to be that. And so I'm very happy with Colton McKivitz at right tackle, considering. So you have Trent Williams, You have Dominic Pooney, and now you have Colton McKivitz that are good enough. Now let's get to the tough part. We've got Jake Brendle, and this is one that's probably the most criticized amongst 49er fans and content creators and podcasters and media members alike. Is Jake Brendle good enough? The Chris Verster said that he thought Jake Brendle had his best season as a pro last year in 2024. Does the PFF numbers back that up? Well, his overall grade was a 65. That's 23rd best among centers. So we know there's 32 starting centers in the NFL. He's 23. Means he's only better than, 9 centers in the NFL. And I think that tracks with what we've seen on film. Is there are some guys he's probably better at, right? There's a skill set that Jake Brendle has that definitely works with the 49ers. Some things that they do are that he does well that within the system, right? Getting to the second level, that's one of the things he's elite at. Athleticism, getting to the outside in situations where he pulls or zone blocking scheme, he can get to his point where he needs to go. When it comes to pass protection, it can be a little bit shaky. He needs help. He doesn't have the anchor to be able to withstand a good bull rush. So those are things to remember. So 23rd best center, I think that's probably pretty close to where he's at. 23 to 26. I think that's exactly what you see on film. His pass block grade was at 55.1 last year. That's 51st amongst 64 centers that were graded. So that's the weakness we're talking about when it comes to pass protection. And that's one of the elements he's going to have to be better at for the 49ers to be more consistent. Now, I talked about the run game earlier. If the 49ers can run the ball a little bit more, Colton McKivitz will be a little bit better. Jake Brendle will be a little bit better. Dominic Pooney and Trent Williams, they'll all improve a little bit. That's going to be one of the things. They got to run the ball consistently in 2025 if they're going to have a better grade when it comes to offensive line. Because when it comes to run blocking, Jake Brendle got a 71.6 grade. He does a good job when it comes to run blocking, and it's getting to the point and getting on a guy that he does well. It's being able to combo block, get a push with his offensive guard, then push up to the second level and get to that linebacker. Is he always able to hold that block consistently? No, he's not. But is he able to get there? Yeah, most times he is. And so that's something he's good at, and that's why he had a 71.6 grade run blocking grade, which is 13th best among centers. There's the discrepancy, right, between run blocking and pass blocking. Pass blocking, he's 51st. Run blocking, he's 13th. But he does play all the snaps. He does not miss any snaps at all, and that's part of the reason they like him. Durability. He knows what the calls are going to be. He knows what he's supposed to do. When you look at his sacks, he only allowed 1 sack last year, and so when you look at that element, you see that he's not doing too bad. Now, we know that Brock Purdy plays into this. Brock Purdy's escapability inside the pocket, being able to move inside the pocket and get rid of the football has been a huge help to guys like Colton McKivitz and Jake Brendle. So that's, definitely something that the 49ers can remember when they're trying to see if they're good enough. But 10 penalties at center ranked him 63rd worst amongst 64 centers. That is really bad. And usually what that means is you got beat, so then you held on. And I think that's what you're getting from Jake Brendle, is I think a lot of times he has to hold on because he's out of position, especially in pass protection, and he's holding on for dear life to make sure no one gets to Brock Purdy. This is the first situation where we get to an offensive lineman of the 4 we've talked about where I say I don't think he's quite good enough. And it's not something to where I think the 49ers, if you have him as one of the 5 offensive linemen, can't be a top 15 offensive line, because I do believe that, because the elements of his game, like the run blocking, is good enough. But I think when you're talking about in totality, you'd love for somebody to be able to take Jake Brendle's spot. But the problem is there's right now no one consistent enough to be able to take a spot. We'll talk about those guys in a second. They're just not. And so Brendle's going to be the guy. And I think there's elements, like I said, the run blocking, right, the intelligence to make the calls. In those areas, he's good enough. In the pass blocking, he's not. And I worry about that being overwhelming. The penalties also setting the 49ers back. Those are not good traits. So this is the first time I'm going to put it at maybe right under the element, right? In Chris Verster's thing, I'm going right under. I know Verster's got him over. I'm going just under for Jake Brendle. Now let's talk about Ben Barch. He's going to be a new left guard potentially for the 49ers. His overall grade last year, and he only played 65 snaps. So let's keep that in mind. He got injured shortly after taking over, but he had a 74.8 grade in that time. That was 23rd best amongst the offensive guards. And his pass block grade was a 74, which is very good. Once again, 23rd best amongst guards. He had a 71.2 grade in the run game, which is 29th best. Those things show the consistency, and this is what I've been talking about with consistency at guard, is that's what they're looking at with Ben Barch, is they're looking at consistency with their offensive line, and Barch presents that. He's pretty good at pass blocking. He's pretty good at run blocking. Is he elite at either one? No, but he's pretty darn good. Now, how will that extrapolate once you get more snaps? That's a good question. That's what the 49ers are going to try to find out. But Ben Barch, to me, is a player that I think is good enough, right? I think he is. I think he can be good enough. So when I'm looking at the offensive line, I got Jake Brendle, and I only got Jake Brendle in one category that I think is not good enough, and that's run blocking. I think when it comes to everything else, intelligence, football-wise, athleticism, run blocking, he's good enough. It's the pass blocking and the lack of anchor that is a struggle. It could be also the fact that he can't hold blocks. That is definitely a struggle, but with timing, sometimes you can get through it. As a former offensive coordinator and offensive line coach, I know that if your timing is right, sometimes all that has to happen is that offensive lineman just needs to get enough. I had a lot of guys that were offensive linemen that just got enough, and it works. It can work. So let's look at that. Now, I wanted to talk about Nick Zakelj because I think Nick Zakelj is in competition for that left guard spot. Now, Nick Zakelj last year had a 58.7 grade. He did play double the snaps of Ben Barch. In fact, almost triple. He played 162 snaps last year and had a 58.7 grade, which is not ideal. But he had a 77.7 pass blocking grade, which was ninth best amongst guards. This is the element that I think is interesting because I think he's in competition for left guard, but also in, potentially center. Is if you want an upgrade at center when it comes to passing game, Nick Zakelj could be that guy. The problem is he's inverted with Jake Brendle to where his run blocking grade's a 51.2 and Jake Brendle's run blocking grade's a 71. So you get an improvement in the pass blocking, but a detriment in the run blocking. That's why he hasn't been able to take Jake Brendle's spot. So as a backup, though, I think Nick Zakelj is going to be just fine. I think if we can see a little bit of improvement in the run game, get him up over 60 with that pass blocking grade probably getting a little bit better, I think you've got a very solid backup. And maybe if you could get a run blocking grade to elevate a lot, could push. So that he makes it interesting. And you look at Matt Hennessy, who they added as well, and he's a guy that comes in now. He only played 16 snaps last year. So not a lot of snaps at center, but when he did play center, he had a 70.7 pass block grade and a 60.4 run block grade. The pass blocking is the antithesis of Jake Brendle. He's opposite. So that's the same thing. Can he get his run blocking up? It's better than Nick Zakelj's, but that's going to be the element. If you guys are wanting Jake Brendle to be pushed in training camp, Matt Hennessy and Nick Zakelj have to improve run blocking. That is going to be the area they have to improve to be able to compete with Jake Brendle. They're already better pass blockers, but they need to be effective run blockers because Chris Foerster and Kyle Shanahan look at run blocking first, pass blocking second. So if those guys can become more consistent, better run blockers, this thing's going to open up, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch between the guys. Now, Spencer Burford is going to be another key backup for the 49ers. Last year, 57.6 grade as a guard. We know he's going to be moving outside offensive tackle initially. 64 pass block grade, 53 run grade. Wasn't his best season. He only had 113 snaps. Of course, it started the season with the broken hand. Let's see what he does when he gets to the outside. He's got to be better when it comes to pass blocking if the 49ers are going to be able to count on him. He didn't give up any sacks last year. He didn't commit any penalties in the 113 snaps that he took. But the run blocking is an area he should be very good at, and it wasn't good last year. That needs to get better, and his pass blocking grade is going to have to get better as well. One more guy to mention before we look at the NFC West defensive lines is when you look at Andre Dillard, now he only played 13 snaps last year, which is nothing. But when you go back and you look at his career, he's been a pretty consistent pass blocker. The run blocking is definitely something he needs to get better at. But I think he's going to be able to come in, and he's kind of in the Ben Bartch mold as a guy that's a little bit more consistent. But we're going to have to see what he could do out there playing. So those are your key elements to this 49ers offensive line. I think when you're talking about the starters, when you look at it that way with four guys, right? It's that are good in almost all categories. It's good enough. I think Jake Brendle has elements, like I said, that are good enough. So being ranked in the top 15 doesn't surprise me. I think when you look at the depth, they need these guys to get a little bit more, a little bit better and more productive in a certain area, right? A lot of it has to go with run blocking. Burford needs to get better at run blocking. Hennessy, better at run blocking. Sakel, better at run blocking. Dillard, a little bit in that category as well. And so I think that that's the element that we need to see them improve, and Chris Foerster needs to work on. Now let's look at the defensive lines, and let's see if the 49ers offensive line is going to be good enough to hold up. Now, first off, let's look at the Arizona Cardinals. They added Calais Campbell. They added Dalvin Tomlinson. They drafted Walter Nolan. That's pretty impressive. They signed Josh Sweat. That's tough. They already drafted Darius Robinson last year. They have got a very, very talented defensive line. They still have LJ Collier, Dante Stills. I think this one's going to be a tough matchup. I think Dalvin Tomlinson is going to be a little bit of an issue on the interior for Jake Brendle. This is where I worry if they're good enough in the interior. I think that 49ers offensive line will be able to hold up against a guy like Walter Nolan. I think they'll be just fine, especially in year one. Calais Campbell, it'll be a battle, but Dominic Pooney and Colton McKivitz, those guys can compete. The one worry I have is Dalvin Tomlinson on the inside and what that's going to look like. So are they good enough to hold Arizona at bay? I think for the most part, it'll be a competition. I do think Arizona is going to get to the 49ers a little bit. Now, when you look at the Rams, Braden Fisk, Poona Ford, who was a huge addition for the Rams. I think that was great. They got Kobe Turner, Byron Young, right? He's going to be bringing pressure off the edge. Same with Jared Verse. That's pretty impressive. DeJuan Johnson out of Tulsa. No one really talks about him. He was a Mr. Irrelevant the year after Brock Purdy, and he was one of the guys that I was a big fan of. I like him a lot. They got Josiah Stewart in the draft. I think that he's going to be able to make, an impact as well. They definitely have some guys. They definitely have some talent. I think that the biggest question mark is going to be for the San Francisco 49ers, once again, when you get these 3-4 defensive styles, Poona Ford against Jake Brendle. And that's the one thing we've noticed right now, right? Whether it's Tomlinson or it's Poona Ford, they're looking for that matchup of Brendle versus them. And when it comes to anchoring, Brendle doesn't have an anchor against these big defensive linemen. And them getting an internal push is going to be tough. These teams are adding edge presence that can go out there and stop the run, but can bring pressure. Jared Verse off the edge against Colton McKivitz is going to be a tough battle for McKivitz, and he had to deal with that last year. So I think when you look at their roster, I think there are some questions. Once again, the biggest question mark has got to be Poona Ford versus Jake Brendle. And Braden Fisk on obvious pass downs against Ben Bartch. That's going to be a test. That is really going to be a test. So 49ers good enough offensive line to be able to handle that. I think if they can run the ball. If you can run the ball consistently and get Poona Ford chasing and not being able just to get a direct penetration on Jake Brendle, you're going to have a chance. But this is what this NFC West is doing. The NFC West is adding players that are going to make a big difference, with who they have on the defensive line. And I think that that's one of the key elements that, these teams are looking for is guys, especially that are going to be able to get a push on Jake Brendle, because everyone knows that that's kind of a weakness for this 49ers offensive line. Everyone sees it. And the Seattle Seahawks are no different. And Seattle has got one of the most impressive defensive lines. This is the defensive line that I think the 49ers probably have the most nightmares about when you're talking about overall girth and physicality up front. Leonard Williams is an absolute beast. He gives the 49ers problems every single year. Byron Murphy's going to year 2, and this is a guy that started over Alfred Collins at Texas. He's an absolute monster. Jaron Reed on the inside as well. Then they add in Demarcus Robinson. He's going to be bringing pressure as well. They've got Jonathan Hankins. He's going to be a little bit of a problem on the inside for Jake Brendle. I think when you look at the way that they've built this football team, they have built this team to make it very difficult for the 49ers up front when it comes to offensive line play. The Niners are going to have to get the outside zone going and run away a little bit from guys like Byron Murphy and Leonard Williams. It's going to be tough sledding. I think the 49ers offensive line has got their work cut out for them against Seattle, against Los Angeles, and against the Arizona Cardinals. I think it's going to be tough. I do think that of the 3 the 49ers are going to face, they match up the worst with the Seattle Seahawks. I think just looking at Byron Murphy, Leonard Williams, and Jaron Reed alone, but also Demarcus Robinson, that is a 4-man tandem that's going to be tough to deal with because they put pressure on your weakest elements. Jake Brendle, Colton McKivitz, those are some Ben Barch. Those are your weakest elements, and that's where those guys kind of put pressure. So that's going to be the most difficult part of the 49ers. So I think when you look at overall, when you look at the talent and what they're able to do, I do think the 49ers offensive line is good enough to help you win football games, to establish a run game, to hold up in pass protection for the most part. I think in key elements and key games, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. I think Kyle Shanahan and Chris First are actually going to have to scheme it up a little bit to help their offensive line. They're going to have to get rid of the football a little bit early. They're going to have to run some outside zone. They're going to have to attack the edge and get away from some of those interior defensive linemen that are going to be problems for guys like Jake Brendle. So in those categories, it's going to be a little bit more difficult. So this is something that's going to be fun to watch during the season. But I think the 49ers have 2 really good offensive linemen in Pooney and Trent Williams. I think they have a couple of guys that are capable. I think one more proven than the other with Colton McKivitz. And then we'll see what happens with Ben Barch. And I just worry about Jake Brendle. The question will be, when do you make that change? Does it end up changing next year? I think that's going to be one of the big parts. But I think if they allow some of these matchups to end up being one-on-one and don't give Jake Brendle help, there's going to be a problem with some of the bigger defensive tackles and defensive nose tackles getting a problem on Jake Brendle. It is the overall point that if I was a defensive coordinator, I would be highlighting as the weakness of the San Francisco 49ers offensive line would be that center position. So I think the 49ers are good enough, I think, to finish top 15 in the league when it comes to O-line, especially with Christian McCaffrey back, with Trent Williams back, as long as he can stay healthy, and an improved Dominic Pooney, and I think an improved Colt McKivitz. I think that could help a lot. So this is going to be a fun one. Let me know. Do you guys think the 49ers offensive line is good enough? In the comment section down below. Curious to hear what you have to say. Please like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Listening audio platform, 49ers Cutback on Believe Network. Please give it a 5-star rating. This episode is brought to you by Bet Online. The game starts here. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Until then, stay safe. Remember, the right way is always the 49ers way.